10 months in 24, you did what, 1.2, almost 1.2 million in revenue?
Yeah, man, I just had one question for you. What made you want to invest in Waterloo and join our board and end up becoming a franchisee as well?
And this one is extra special to me since I am now an investor, a board member, and soon to be a franchisee.
You know, our slogan is get your Saturdays back, and we really mean it. From the client's perspective, that just means not having to do yard work all day Saturday.
This industry is growing at 6 to 8% per year. There's like way faster. There's definitely like some macro level trends going on and just this like environmentally friendly interest.
Water's expensive. We're gonna roll out a freshen up program.
That's awesome. You know, everyone loves the recurring revenue, the predictability. I think a lot more people are gonna be installing turf.
Couldn't agree more. I love it. You're getting me jacked up talking about it.
Awesome episode today. I got Lance Ingram here, the founder of Waterloo Turf, a brand new franchise specializing in artificial turf installation and maintenance. And this one is extra special to me since I am now an investor, a board member, and soon to be a franchisee. Today, we're going to dive into the business model, the industry, and plans to make Waterloo the #1 turf franchise here in the country. So welcome, Lance.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Brian. Super excited.
Awesome. So how did you get involved in the turf business?
Long story short, I was graduating college. I went to Baylor. I was graduating without a job. And so I had a buddy that was a few years older than me who he had reached out and said, do you want to get involved in artificial turf? And at first I was like, no, I don't. I don't know anything about that space. It sounds like landscaping. It reminds me of Saturdays growing up with the lawnmower. Like, I'm good. But shortly after moving back home to Austin, I decided that the other ventures I was looking at didn't really stand out to me too much. And I'd always kind of had a desire to have an entrepreneurial type of job. So I figured out I'm 22, I'm living at home. You know, why not give this a shot? Let's see what happens. Launched a previous turf company. It went great. I ran that here in Austin, co-founded for about 3 years. And then after that 3 years, essentially, I kind of just got lured in by the corporate appeal. I saw all my buddies doing corporate jobs, traveling, benefits, all that good stuff, company parties, and for, you know, no pun intended, but it was kind of a grass is greener situation. So I got lured away by the corporate life. I went and did medical device sales for about 2 years, and I quickly realized that it's a lot more fun to be your own boss. After about 2 years, a lot of windshield time, driving all over the state of Texas, dealing with unhappy doctors, patients, everything in between. There was a long drive back from Abilene, Texas, which is about 3 or so hours from Austin. It was snowing. It had been a long day. And I just kind of thought to myself, you know, if I could start up another turf company and get it going at somewhat of the same level as I was running previously, this could be a really cool deal. I thought about it. I kind of kept tabs on the turf industry while I was doing medical device sales. It overlapped with COVID. And then I was just watching it continue to explode and just hearing more and more about it. I would still get calls asking for turf, even though I wasn't in the turf space anymore. All this just kind of built up to leaving my steady medical device job the same month I was getting married, which I would not recommend doing, and starting up Waterloo Turf.
So what year was that?
So that was 2021.
So 2021 is when you relaunched kind of for the second time into it. First you had a partner, and the second time now you're totally on your own building this thing up.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
Let's walk through kind of the business itself. How much are you doing, I guess, residential versus commercial? Like, let's start there.
Yeah, I would say we do probably about 70% residential. So I like to say it kind of keeps our day-to-day busy. And then about 30% commercial. So those are great jobs to get. They're a little bit fewer and far between, but as you build healthy relationships within the commercial space, you start to get a more steady flow of those coming in.
Is that harder to break in, the commercial side?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily harder to break in. There's just less frequent jobs. The jobs that we do in that space are on a larger scale. And obviously the timeline of those jobs, it's not just turf that's involved. You kind of have to wait in your timeline until you're up to bat and install your portion of it, versus residential where it's just turnkey, easy in, easy out, typically 1 to 2 day jobs.
It seems a lot of the other artificial turf companies out there are focused on just the big stuff, and they don't even do residential, right?
Yeah, that's definitely, there's a lot of companies that just focus on commercial.
And so then let's get into kind of, I guess, the benefits of why, from a consumer standpoint, we'll start there. Why are people putting in turf versus just growing grass?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons, but you know, water is expensive. It's expensive to keep your yard looking green, to keep it properly upkept. So that's massive. Just people's water bills, it's killing them, especially here in Texas where it's so hot. There's water restrictions that are being put in place. And so people are only allowed to water their yards so much, so many gallons, and it's just tough. So I think that's That's a massive player in it. Two, the maintenance in general of turf versus sod. Turf, there's really none. Sod, you're obviously out there, you're cutting it, you're spending a lot of your day, your time, keeping that thing looking good and green. And it's not guaranteed that it's going to stay that way. And then another one that we enjoy as far as in the turf industry is just people getting their time back. You know, our slogan is get your Saturdays back, and we really mean it. From the client's perspective, that just means not having to do yard work all day Saturday, all day Sunday. It means getting to spend more time with friends and family, getting to be outside without having the headache of being outside because you know you need to be doing some yard work if you're out there. I think those are three of the big key components for why people are moving into turf. And also, to be honest, AstroTurf from back in the day kind of jaded people's mindset towards turf. And so now that turf's becoming more and more popular, you're starting to see it in a lot more commercial spaces or just your friends' backyards, and you're starting to realize people are starting to realize it's not AstroTurf from the 70s anymore. The stuff looks really, really natural. It looks really realistic. And I think that's been a big game changer for the turf industry continuing to boom.
Yeah, that's a big one, especially when you think about the sports. You hear all these stories of people getting hurt, and it's turf and the NFL stadiums and stuff. And then it's like rough and unforgiving, and it's soft. You can get it in any different texture, color, length.
Yeah, it's exactly. People used to think about it as carpet, and that's kind of what it was. Now you get in different lengths, different feels. There's brown thatching in it, so it adds a little bit of just natural deadness into it, which I think people really enjoy. So it's not just this bright green that's obviously fake in your backyard. You're getting a natural looking lawn without the upkeep of having a really good natural looking lawn.
The more I've talked to people now that I'm starting to get into it, you know, you learn that there's some municipalities out there that will, like, yeah, like you said, have water restrictions, or even say like give incentives. Like this one guy lives in an HOA and they have like extremely restrictive water, and then they say, hey, we'll actually give you a credit and like lower your costs because you're not using water if you install turf. And so he has turf in his front yard and it looks great, and like that's a big one. And then you think about just the chemicals, like all the I mean, I have grass still, and like all these chemicals, and we're always concerned about letting the kids and the dogs and, you know, all this stuff. And I think it's, you know, there's definitely this like big macro trend from like our dad's time of like, you know, they want to be out there, they want to do it all themselves, to like now a lot of it, this like do it for me culture. We think about people wanting like their food delivered and this delivered and everything instantly happened, to have one less thing to worry about, having a yard that looks great, and you can just, like you said, go get your Saturdays back, enjoy playing on the turf, not cutting it, is a huge benefit to the people.
It's massive. And I mean, especially with people with pets, you know, something that a lot of people don't realize is that synthetic grass is very pet friendly. A lot of it's made with pets in mind. So for the wear and tear, pet usage, also just keeping your house clean. When you let your dogs out in the evening time or the morning, it had just rained, and then they're coming in and they're tracking, you know, muddy paws and all that throughout your house. You know, this gets rid of that aspect. So you can let your dogs out freely, let them back in freely. And on the waste side of things, turf drains extremely well. There's a lot of different products on the market that help with the smell, the bacteria that a lot of people are worried about with pet usage. So it's an extremely pet-friendly product, kid-friendly, non-toxic. It's just all around.
And then I've seen on your Instagram tons of like putting greens, set up multiple things. You make it kind of fun, and then now you actually have like more of a usage for adults, not just like, you know, kids playing on it, right?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, putting greens have definitely exploded.
Are they easy to install, or are they like, is there any more difficulty with those?
It's a little bit more detailed than a standard turf installation. They're a ton of fun to do. They're a lot of fun afterwards, especially seeing the client get out there and roll some putts. And yeah, it's been great. It's good for kids, obviously. It's great for entertaining, or it's just great for the grill side dad that wants to throw some meat on the grill, have a beer, and then while the meat's cooking, roll some putts, kind of pass some time. There's a lot of different usage of it, but entertaining is definitely a big one.
Yeah, the other thing, I mean, we're seeing as from an industry standpoint is it's a growing industry. Tons of numbers out there. It's hard to know which, you know, what to believe, but all of them, it's like this industry is growing at 6 to 8% per year, which is like way faster than, you know, a lot of industries that grow at like, you know, 1 or 2% or just keep up with inflation. There's definitely like some macro level trends going on. I think especially on the residential side, it sounds like as these things start to build, and probably only going to get increased, especially when it comes to water and chemicals and just this like environmentally friendly interest.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the cool thing about turf too is that compared to other home service goods, that it's something that's really noticeable. For example, if you have your gutters worked on and you have some friends over, most likely they're not going to point out your gutters and say, man, who did your gutters? Those
look so clean.
So clean. But the cool thing with turf is that it's going to get recognized every time. You have turf done, your friends come over, it's most likely going to be asked about. And as a turf installer, that's a really big deal, because one job is not usually just one job. That job could lead to 10 more jobs. Assuming you're doing quality work and it meets the client's expectations, their friends, their family are going to see it and ideally be reaching out to you for quotes and then for potential jobs.
Yeah. So do you see that you do like one in a neighborhood and then all of a sudden you've got another in a neighborhood? And
Yeah, we see it all the time where,
have you done
Leslie
back
down
to
the
back? Have
street.
you done neighbors?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because you got neighbors looking over
Three,
neighbors'
three in a
yard,
row? Like
fences
what's the record here of,
in a row.
yeah.
Oh man, I mean, we've definitely done a good handful of yards back to back to back. And just kind of word spreads. Word of mouth is huge for a turf company, and just gaining traction, especially in those beginning years, extremely important.
Yeah, so let's get into, you launched Austin in 2021, and that was like you doing everything from day one. And then at what point did you hire a manager? Because right now you have somebody who's kind of the lead project manager, right? Like what's your staff look like there?
Yeah, so I actually just hired first sales guy operator here in Austin about 2 months ago. So me and my wife just had our first child, and it was, kind of at that it was kind of at that point where I was like, all right, the business is growing. I'd already been getting pushed as the business owner, where it's just like, we need some help. We're just continuing to grow. And so kind of forced my hand on it, but it's been great just growing with the business and making sure that as the business owner, you still own the business, because there was definitely a period of time where it started to feel like the business was owning me just from our growth and needing to grow with it.
And so I know in the FDD, you provided super transparent, right? I think it was a 2023, 12 months P&L, 24, I think it was January through October, because now it's December, and by 25, you have the full year. But through
24,
10 months in
yep.
24, you did what, 1.2, almost 1.2 million in revenue?
In Austin,
Yep.
yeah, for 10 months in 24, we just did a bit north of 1.1.
1.1, okay.
And then in San Antonio, for the first 10 months, we did just a little bit north of 600K.
And then you launched San Antonio in just the beginning of this year, right? January 24?
Yep, January of 24. Mm-hmm.
And obviously that one, you had a manager from day one, somebody kind of running it.
Exactly. Yeah. So San Antonio, I had a buddy that was just interested in turf. He had kind of been seeing what Waterloo had been doing for the last couple of years and reached out and was interested in starting one up in San Antonio. So we just kind of went full send with it. And he started up in January, and he's been running it pretty much as his own thing ever since. We put the systems in place for it. We got the crew going. He learned the ins and outs and the operations of the whole thing. And he's been running and gunning and doing a great job.
Did you intentionally kind of set that up like a franchise, thinking this is what you wanted to do? Or is that kind of in retrospect, or just worked out that way?
It kind of just worked out that way. Obviously I wanted to have a separate city that I wasn't super involved with, just because I wanted to continue to replicate this years down the road. So I guess there's maybe a part of me in hindsight that was trying to build something that was reproducible, and San Antonio was the guinea pig of that.
So you launch that thing, you get this guy rolling. What do you think his biggest challenge starting from zero has been?
I think his biggest challenge starting from zero would probably just be gaining turf knowledge. He wasn't in the landscaping business at all. Prior to this, he had no experience with any landscaping or construction. I think just the first couple months of going to bidding out projects and getting a feel for the install process of it, if there was a hurdle, that was the biggest one. But as time goes and you just kind of get into a groove of things and you see it on a pretty daily basis, it starts to become second nature.
Most of the people that come in are not going to have any turf knowledge. So what's your play to then get people up to speed as quick as possible, taking all the knowledge you have over the last almost decade probably into days and weeks for them?
Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit of having about 7 years of turf experience and having started a turf company twice now. So I know the challenges that come with starting up a market and everything that it takes to do that. And I also know the downfalls of what not to do. So I think the benefit for anybody that wants to come on board is just they won't have to go through the struggle and downfall and the failures necessarily that I had went through trial and error. A little bit of a cheat sheet. The playbook is there. We've done it in San Antonio and it's been going great. Really just following the playbook that's been put in place is the best way to go about it.
And that looks like, right, online training, not packing all the knowledge into online, and then physical training, in Austin, get, hand boots on the ground. And then you guys are flying out, at least for the first group of franchisees, to get hands-on.
Exactly. We'll be flying out. We'll be hands-on. First installs for every new franchisee is going to have coaches there, trainers on site. And then, yeah, like you said, trainings will be in Austin, 4-day trainings, all the ins and outs between bidding, project managing, being on site for projects, seeing a turnkey install, and everything in between.
How many installs do you think someone has to go through before they're 80% comfortable with it?
I would say probably about 7 installs,
Okay.
you'll get to see a pretty good snapshot as far as, from start to
Issues
finish.
that pop up and how do I get these things resolved? And they're
Yeah,
calling you,
issues.
probably FaceTiming. Like, what do I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. Client
Yeah.
communications, crew management. And then honestly, as long as the processes are being followed, it'll be pretty seamless from that point on. I think the biggest thing is just getting comfortable on a job site. That's really it.
Let's talk about the crews. So the model is we're finding 1099 installers, right? To actually put them down. Franchisees are not the ones laying down the turf.
No, that would be good for nobody.
So then how do we go about finding their right installer? Who are the right installers? What's their background? How do we find them? How do we make sure they're trained in like the Waterloo way?
We like to look for installers that have some landscaping experience. And ideally, the ones that we have found in the past is they have landscape experience or maybe even their own landscape business, but they're not so busy to where they can't take on more work. And so we take them on as our turf installers, get them trained up, and then eventually they become so busy with turf installations that they don't really have time for that other landscaping work they were doing previously. As far as what we look for with the crew, we like to have a foreman, obviously, who's leading the charge on the crew side, and then a good size for a crew is about 4 to 5 guys. And so that'll kind of help ensure that your square footage that you're trying to get taken out within that one day, which is around, give or take, 800 square feet, is able to be optimized and knocked out. So the crew gets trained up. They have all their material, their equipment, and then they're in charge of, the logistics of picking up material and obviously getting the turf installed.
And what kind of equipment do they need? And is that a hurdle for them?
We haven't seen it be a hurdle because usually, again, if they're coming from the landscaping industry, they're going to have the majority of the big equipment that's needed. So trucks, trailers, shovels, rakes, things of that nature. And then a couple miscellaneous items that will need to be purchased is like a plate compactor. We've seen crews typically don't have that, or at least the ones we've interacted with.
It's like
and then,
tamped down, right?
yeah, just a vibrating tamper compactor. This special tool called the power broom we use at the end of jobs to fluff the blades up, spread the infill into the turf, and then refluff them up. So it just gets the turf looking nice and tall, and allows that infill we put in to sink down into the bottom of the turf to reinforce the blades.
And have you found onboarding new crews that they're pretty receptive to learning like the way you want it done?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they've been receptive. They like to learn, the ones that we worked with. And then, to be honest, as long as you're providing the work on a frequent basis, they're obviously going to be receptive. Yeah, pay on time. Treat them with respect. Make sure you're doing your end of the job to make their lives easier and keeping the work on schedule. You're gonna have a really good chance of keeping the crew around.
How do you find them?
So the way I found them, like I said, is kind of reaching out in the yellow pages. I've done that where I've reached out,
calling them and saying, "Hey, you guys are interested in what I got to say?"
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, how's your business? Are y'all doing a lot of work? If not, awesome. You want to go grab coffee and we can go talk about turf if that's something you're interested in. And then I've also, just as Waterloo's grown, I've had turf installers reach out to us asking if we're taking on more work, which is another way that we've found some labor over the years.
So how many crews do you have in Austin?
So we're running 2 crews.
And San Antonio is one-ish, maybe a little bit more?
San Antonio is 1 crew right now.
Is that about the volume, like $500-600 grand-ish per crew? You think is like kind of what they can handle?
Yeah, definitely. I would say about $600K for like a territory is 1 crew. We've run 1 crew up to $1 million in revenue. It's definitely possible, but as you grow, you can pick up another crew. You can maximize your days, ideally doing 2 installs a day if you get to that point, and run them that way.
From a marketing standpoint, you're getting leads through the referrals. We talked about that, word of mouth. What about digitally or any other ways you see? I mean, you getting leads and plan for franchisees?
We do Google advertising. That's honestly the main other advertising we do. Like I said, besides Google ads, word of mouth takes over and it really propels your business. High focus on doing quality work because that's going to lead to more business. And obviously, if your work's not quality, it's going to highly damage your business, especially in those startup days.
Walk me through the process of you go on site, you got an estimate, somebody's interested, you're on site. What's the discussion with the customer? We get the job to then, starting this process of what does installation look like?
Yeah. So we'll show up on site, we'll schedule an on-site visit with the client, meet them at their project, and just kind of walk through, what's going on with their yard. What are they wanting to do? What are they unhappy with at the moment that they were looking to change? And then kind of why, knowing why they want to do it is pretty important. So whether it's because kids, pets, water usage, it's just helpful to know. So we'll meet with them, get a feel for what they're wanting to do and why they're wanting to do it. and then I'll measure out their project site. I'll get the exact dimension sizes of the turf roll that's needed. I'll take account for the waste, which is, say you're cutting around a tree, that waste that you cut around, that's considered a waste cost. And then I'll drop a quote. I try to send it to them while I'm on site if possible, and then run through that quote with them while you're in front of them. Ideally, if they're able to commit to the install, we go ahead and plug them into our installation schedule at that moment. We send them a 50% deposit invoice prior to installation. And then once their installation day shows up on our calendar, crew's there by 8:30. I'm there a little bit earlier just to beat the crew. And then me and my foreman and the client will walk the job site together, make sure that everyone is on the same page for what's about to happen. Once the three of us walk the site, all the boxes are checked on what needs to be done. The crew gets things going. And then I periodically check in on the job throughout the process. And then upon completion, me, the client, and the foreman will all walk the job site together, make sure the client's extremely pleased with the final outcome. And if there's any touch-ups needed, it's best to hit those before the crew leaves the job site so that they can address it right at that moment rather than trying to send them back, the next day or a few days later. Just kind of simplifies it. Organization is high priority. So making sure you're keeping your days organized so you can be on site when you need to be for walkthroughs and then post installs, and then making sure that you're available for that.
The actual installation, are they ripping up old grass? Are they able to lay it down over dirt depending on the condition? Like, what does the prep work look like for the crews?
For a standard, so if we're talking to standard residential, say it's a client that's got a yard with sod in it, but they're tired of watering in, they just want to get it replaced with artificial turf. Our guys will go in and they will remove all the sod. If irrigation is there, we'll either
sod cutter or whatever machine
sod cutter, weed whacker, shovel it out. And then if irrigation's there, the client will decide previously if they want the irrigation to pop through or if they want the irrigation cap. So we make sure the crew's aware of that. And then once that's taken care of, we'll put in any edging that's needed. So the edging is essentially needed, say along a fence line where there's a crack that runs along the bottom side of the fence. We want to make sure that the base that we're going to be putting into that project space doesn't wash away over time. So we need to put a hard edge in. Once we put all that base in, it keeps it there. So edging in, a standard quote is about 3 inches of decomposed granite base. And so we'll spread 3 inches across the project site, get it nice and level, graded for drainage purposes, and then we'll compact it with that plate compactor we had talked about, apply a weed cloth, and then we'll roll out the turf, seam it together, secure it along the edges, and then apply that infill in on top.
How's it seamed? Stapled?
There's a couple different ways. We like to use U-staples. It's about every 4 to 6 inches we'll apply a U-staple along the seam. Our guys will take their time making sure none of the blades of the turf get pulled in with that U-staple, so kind of go through each one and pluck the hairs of the turf out to make sure it's invisible, it's seamless. And then along the edges, we'll use non-galvanized 6-inch nails about every 3 or so inches. Drive that into the turf. It's important to use non-galvanized because they rust over time. So you want them to rust, expand when they rust, so it makes it really difficult to pull the turf out.
What are some of the issues that you have during installation that you really got to watch out for? Or like, I don't know, if you had a crew that's trying to cut corners, what would be some of the signs that as the owner, you'd want to make sure so you can like call it out?
Yeah, I mean, base preparation is huge. Besides the actual turf installation portion of the job, making sure the base is done the right way, them taking their time, making sure everything's level, it's graded, it's raked out properly, and they'll usually, rake it out, hit it with the plate compactor, hose it off, scrape it again with the rake, compact it again. That just allows the base, if there's any settling that's going to occur, it allows it to settle at that time rather than 3 weeks down the road when that client gets their first big rain that shows up and then everything just starts to get all undulated and all over the place. So we take care of that at that point. Base compaction is definitely key. And then obviously the seam work that goes into a turf install is massive. The way that I've explained it to our crews in the past is clients have an expectation when they walk out their back door to see their backyard upon completion. And it starts at, a 10. They want that 10 look. And the second they see a seam upon walking out their backyard, that 10 immediately drops down to like a 7. If they can walk out and see no seam and it's just a sea of green, just nice lush turf, chances are they're going to stay at that 10. They're going to be super hyped about it. They're going to tell all their friends and family about it and leave you an amazing 5-star review.
What happens if there's seams? How do they fix it?
So they'll have to go back. They'll kind of have to stretch it out, pull it up a little bit, re-secure it. So we like to use what's called an S seam to get real technical with you, but essentially it's a wavy pattern that when the turf folds, the blades don't cross.
The turf you're buying is already cut with that S edge?
No, so our guys actually do it. So there's a tool out there that our guys use, and they flip the turf over, they kind of sketch it onto it, and then they'll use a straight blade or utility knife and cut out that S seam. And so when it folds over, it just falls into place because the blades have a direction to them. It's slightly turned right. Again, getting probably way too technical.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, but
this is like what they get trained on, right? This is like why you get into a franchise, because you've got, who's an extremely technical expert, who's like the turf god here, who knows all this stuff, right? And then people have to figure it out on their own.
We like to do good work. Straight seams have kind of been the standard within the turf industry. A lot of people still do them, and some people are able to get away with them, but there's a problem of creating the mohawk look, is what we call it, where those blades cross and you can just see very evidently every 15
How much
feet.
longer does it take to them to cut? Because they got to cut both sides, right? For the S.
They got to cut both sides. In the beginning, it's a little bit of a learning curve, just like anything. Once they do it a good handful of times, it becomes second nature. We've kind of trained our crews is that if they perfect the S seam in a time lapse or time perspective, it's going to be a lot less work than continuing to do a straight seam and having clients irritated by it and having to go back and do that repair work on it.
You will just find someone else who wants to do it the right way. Like that, and then they get no business, right? That's the truth at the end of the day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, they are subcontracted workers, and you want to have a good crew that you have a good relationship with. But at the same time, client comes first, and making sure that our quality standards are met and kept. The product that a friend sees in their client's backyard is going to be the same product that they end up getting in their backyard. It's really important.
How big are the rolls?
So they come 15 feet wide and usually up to give or take 100 feet long.
That makes it easier than if they're like 4 foot or whatever,
They're not exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the marketing that you guys, the branding that you guys do. You've got one of your hats on now. I know that's like a big thing for you, with tons of different hats and kind of this fun idea and brand. Talk a little bit about that, and like if you plan to continue that as you grow nationwide.
The armadillo, really fun, like mascot for Waterloo, essentially. Armadillos in Texas, it's kind of synonymous with each other. I just wanted to play off that, and then with a little bit of turf coming out of the back of them, it just gives the brand a little bit of personality. There really wasn't too much thought into it when I first came up with it. Besides that, I just want to have a little bit of fun. And then on the hat side of things, I kind of tell people we've become a hat company that does turf on the sides, because I just love making fun hats, and especially making quality hats that people actually want to wear. The branding of it's been really, really big for Waterloo, and just creating not just turf and turf experiences for people, but ideally swag that they want to wear, because then they become walking advertising for you.
Do you give people hats after jobs?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
a whole merch kit.
Oh yeah. Always give a hat out after a job. Give them a few options too.
And you're friends with the Pinks guys, right? Pinks Windows.
Yeah. So I went to college with Carter. We graduated together, and then I see him all the time here in Austin. It's
got that similar vibe of fun, retro, modern, and just instead of something that's like, boring and older. So
yeah, no, and they do an amazing job with it. They're awesome guys. They crush it, and both here in Austin.
So let's pivot a little bit to kind of on the franchise model here. What's an ideal franchisee? What do they look like? What's maybe their background? But more importantly, like, how do they think? How do they act?
Yeah, an ideal franchisee is kind of, we're going for like a team captain personality type. Wants to run their own business, is excited by it, kind of has that entrepreneurial drive, is super organized, attention detailed, and is a go-getter. At the end of the day, anybody that becomes a Waterloo Turf franchisee, you are owning your own business. And so it needs to be treated that way. And for you to be able to go out, gain new business, gain amazing client relationships, commercial relationships, expect and do high quality work.
I know you spent in the past looking for people who like maybe sports, like they've played for NCAA sports, they've led a team, maybe they're in the military, something that have like leadership, management, drive, resiliency, because that's what it takes to be a business owner, right?
Yeah, leadership, drive, routine, finding a routine that works. I think a lot of collegiate athletes are routine driven. When they're in a sport, their days are kind of laid out for them, and they function really well going about their days a certain way at a certain rate and continuing to run that same process. The way I run Waterloo here is very standard way. Every day is pretty similar in the way I go about it. It allows consistency, which is, again, super important.
And one of the things that you guys are doing, I think is awesome, is having this franchisee first mentality, especially when it comes to driving franchisee profitability. I mean, a number of things, obviously I've been a champion of, is the reduced royalty model. So I think what's it, item 7, I don't know, item 6 in the FDD's got like, the royalty structures, and yours, starts at 6%. And then as they drive volume, the royalty goes down. That's extremely rare. Not many brands do have a reduced royalty model. But I think it's awesome because we run a pretty big franchise business in ours. And what happens is like the bigger you get, the less reliance you have on the franchisor versus like, we do $45 million. We're way less like work for corporate than 45 individual franchisees doing $1 million. They have one contact, they have one thing. Generally, we have our own way of doing it. And so it makes sense that in theory, you don't have as much cost dealing with larger franchisees. So why charge them as much royalties? What were some of the other thoughts that you kind of had in approval of that?
Yeah, on that point, I mean, the big driver of why I started to think about becoming a franchisor and run Waterloo this way versus the corporate route is one, to grow the brand on a larger scale and quicker, but two, franchise profitability is the main thing. It's the main driver. We want to give people a similar lifestyle to what I have right now through Waterloo and to be able to reproduce that across the country. And yeah, as someone grows, their dependence on the franchisor is less, but we hope that their profitability is higher and that their take home is greater and they're living a greater life because of it. We're very focused on that and just want to make sure that, again, going back to that get your Saturdays back mentality, as much as it is for the client, it's also for the franchisee, where we want every day to be a Saturday for a franchisee and to run it that way and to really enjoy what they do.
Yeah, I always say that the business should serve the life that you want to live, not you having to live to support the business. Like, what's the point, right? Like you take all this risk and you do all this stuff in order to live the life you want. But a lot of people get stuck in this trap of just being a slave to it. Even for you, like, you got to remove yourself out of that day to day. The only way you can do that, build a business big enough that has profits to be able to hire somebody to replace yourself. But then now you have time, but then you have to continue to grow the business in order to just maintain the safety net for that person. But then also you have time, right? And so you can focus on higher level things, building more relationships, expanding into new markets, whatever the driving force is. The other huge factor is the territories. Roughly 350,000 people per territory. Pretty significant. I mean, 3 territories, you have over 1 million people. Just give franchisees a better opportunity at a lower cost to build a bigger business. And then obviously all the training, the support, the kind of the coaching. Let's talk about a little bit about your partners. Obviously, you've got the knowledge on the franchise operations, right? The turf, the turf expert. You're kind of new to the franchising world. Who do you have on your team that's an expert in that space?
Yeah, so we have a team of a few guys that I end up partnering with. So Jonathan Padden, Ben Pays, and then our main guy, our CEO, who's got all the weapons and the knowledge, is Tim Lovett. So he's been in the franchising space for a bit. I know that obviously y'all know each other well, but Tim, he's just a great dude who's got great vision for the brand and for the company and where he believes that this thing can go. And, we're just kind of following his lead based on his reputation and, the connections and just the way that he just goes about his day to day. It's been awesome so far.
Cool. Well, I'm excited to be on the team and kind of help you guys grow, from a strategic standpoint. I think there's only one, maybe 2 other franchises in the artificial turf space really doing anything, to be honest. So pretty good opportunity here for Waterloo to capture, help a lot of people, make their lawns beautiful, get their Saturdays back, help make franchisees profitable and build some good businesses. So
yeah, no, we're excited. We've got some other ideas that we're rolling out early this next year in 2025. Something I wanted to touch on is we're going to roll out a Freshen Up program. This is going to be really big for obviously us, but all franchisees in general. Is essentially the way a lot of people think about the turf space and a turf installation company is one and done jobs. It's not like Pink's window washing where you can get repeat business on a quarterly basis or whatnot, but we're going to add in this Freshen Up program. As your install list grows, a van will be placed where someone runs that van and on a quarterly, bi-weekly, biannually basis goes out and freshens up previous installed clients' turf and just adds another revenue stream into your business. So we're super excited about that. We think it's going to be really big for the company, and it just allows us to be not just one big ticket item one time, but also create that reproducible income as well.
How frequent do people have to do it? Quarterly, depending on the use?
Yeah, it depends on the usage. For a commercial space, it can be more frequent. So if it's a hotel or whatnot, that they might want it a little bit more often versus a residential where you just got your kids running around, that would probably be more of a quarterly basis. But
if they don't get it done, that's like the flat blades.
Yeah, exactly. So you start to see more of that flat bladed, that matted down look that a lot of people try to ignore. This just allows for your turf to ideally have the longevity that every client is looking for.
And the process is just, you got that power broom, adding more infill and just bringing the bristles back up type of thing.
Yeah, just kind of bringing it back to life or keeping it at life, adding some more of that infill in, and then any minor details that shows up on a client's yard, we can always address it. But it allows for the work that you've done to continue to show quality long after you've been there.
What do you think the potential is there? Any idea what some other companies are doing in terms of number of trucks they have, or any metrics that you think like, hey, this is a huge business?
We've talked to another company and he's doing, can't remember the number exactly, but he's running his whole business off of it. So
not
he's
even doing installation, just doing.
Yep, not even doing installation. So yeah, we see it as a huge revenue driver, something we're super, super excited about. And then obviously, just selfishly, I think having a fleet of vans and trucks running through your city with get your Saturdays back on it, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're super, super stoked about that.
You're launching that in your corporate locations in January?
January, yeah. We're going to launch that here in January.
Do you have any customers interested already, or have you not?
You know, it's kind of been something I've had on the back burner for a while. I've just not really known the right way to go about it. We kind of figured that piece out. I didn't want to launch it. And something with the help of Tim that we kind of brainstormed over the last couple months and came up with a really good system for it. And so now we'll be able to actually follow up with those clients that have been reaching out and tell them that's something we offer. And the goal of it is to get them scheduled upon completion of their installation. Get that install knocked out with them and go ahead and set them up on that recurring visit cycle and then just have it run that way.
That's awesome. You know, everyone loves the recurring revenue, the predictability. Someone's going into a market that's turf's already been installed. Get customers, we didn't install the turf, right? We're just the ones doing the refresh on it.
Exactly. So yeah, you got clients that maybe you didn't even do their yard, but they can still become a client for you, which is cool to think about.
Cool, man. Well, this has been fun. I'm glad to help share your story and looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah, man. I just had one question for you if you're open to questions, but essentially what made you want to invest in Waterloo and join our board and end up becoming a franchisee as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things. One, I like the model in that I like the niche aspect of it. Some other franchises, there's a ton of variations of it. This one's like, it's pretty unique, but it's also in an industry that is pretty big and growing. So people are already buying this thing. That's good versus like teach somebody about it. People are already buying it. They might not be aware of it totally, but then once they find it, I think it's like you said, it's something that, makes a lot of sense. So I like it from a business model standpoint. I like the high ticket. I like the low overhead. I mean, you run this thing from your home. So it's not like you've got a ton of overhead or a ton of ongoing expenses. High ticket, pretty good margin, low overhead, growing industry. It's got that environmental tailwinds behind it. So I think all that's good. The leadership team and everyone who's been put together on your side has been awesome. The commitment to the franchisee profitability has been a big one for me. I think there's a lot of franchises out there that their plan is, I'm going to sell as many franchises as I can as quick as possible to anybody who's willing to write a check. And then I'm going to sell this thing and move on. You've got a bunch of franchisees that are not happy, aren't given proper support or guidance. Now you've got this new buyer of the brand who's like trying to figure it all out. I mean, I've been at conferences where franchisors would boast about how small they want to make territories in order to sell the maximum number of units. And that's like terrible for franchisees and everybody involved. And a big goal of mine from like a macro level is to help change, to make it, that's like not the thing you do, and reduce royalty schedule, large territories, like P&L coaching, like all the things that Waterloo is going to set the standard, the bar should be for any brand. Being able to provide that input, to be on the board, to have a strong say in that, and you guys to be receptive and a proponent of all those things, I think is huge. And I think it could be a great case study of this is what happens when, we have a good brand, great founders, minimal, like there's no junk fees. I've seen these other brands and there's like all these monthly fees. Our model's like super simple, give franchisees, owners a lot of flexibility in who they use, what they pay, provide a good framework, but then let people build a business as big as they can and want. I could go on, but like at a high level, that's between the model, the team, some of my goals, this fits perfectly. And I think a lot more people are going to be installing turf. The more people I talk to about it, first when I was like, well, who but does turf? Like I'm in Philly, like there's not a ton of, I don't see a ton of it. But then once I started talking to people, even in like New Jersey and Maryland, like pretty close to me too, like they're like, oh yeah, I have turf and I love it, or this or that. Like it's so funny that once I started to get into it, then I realized like it's way more prevalent than what I thought. And now I see it everywhere. I go to conferences, I go to these hotels, and there's turf everywhere at these big facilities. And I think, then we got these bars, and even after COVID, there's all these restaurants that now have all these outdoor spaces, even around us. And like many of them have turf out because people kind of like want to be outside. They don't want to be stuck inside. And so I think there's tons of trends that are like, we're still in the early phases, but this thing's only going to go up in terms of the amount of demand. There's not a ton of competitors in the franchise space, right? They're all national level distributors, manufacturers, they won't have the flexibility that we have as a franchisor, huge catalog, right, that we can buy from. We shouldn't have supply chain issues because we can buy from multiple vendors versus being pigeonholed into one and all that.
Couldn't agree more. I love it. You're getting me jacked up talking about it. We're super stoked that you're on board, that you obviously believe in the mission and vision of Waterloo and helping people get their Saturdays back. And obviously, I appreciate you having me on your podcast to talk about Waterloo a little bit and about the future of what's going on.
Well, it's been great. I'll see you, Lance.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it, man.